Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad 9th generation and see how this particular iPad holds up in 2024. Now I will tell you, this is a beautiful iPad and it's still being sold in the brand new market by a lot of different people, and it easily is one of my most favorite iPads that Apple's ever made. Although it isn't as beautiful as the iPad, Pros or even the iPad 10, it still is a very good looking iPad that still has so much power inside of it, and I would 100% recommend buying and purchasing this iPad for sure. So if you want to pick up this iPad, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPad 9, you can see on the front of this thing, we are getting a very large and beautiful 10.2 inch Retina IPS LCD panel on the front of this thing. And it's a very good looking panel. You're getting, a top and bottom bezel. And I will tell you, this panel, for how cheap this iPad is now, it's a very good deal. But it isn't necessarily like the best, panel of all time. It's a very good looking panel, and like I said, I'm a very big fan of the way this panel looks, and I only have good things to say about this particular display from that perspective. But the bezel at the top is pretty big. The bezel at the bottom is fairly large, especially compared to the iPad 10 and the iPad Pros and the iPad Airs. This is really the only iPad that kind of looks like this anymore. I think this is the only iPad Apple sells with a home button, but I don't think it's a bad thing either, and I definitely do think this iPad looks very, very good. And the viewing angles of this iPad are good, and I still don't mind having Touch ID on the front either. So I like this iPad on the front. I think it looks perfectly fine. On the bottom, you do have a Lightning port. Now this Lightning port does support Apple Pencil 1, which is very good, and having Apple Pencil 1 support is a very, very nice thing, and I personally love having that type of capability. On top of that Lightning port, supports a lot of different accessories you can throw inside of your iPad as well. So that's another pretty big asset going on for this particular device too. You can easily just go through and plug in a bunch of different accessories inside of this iPad. So if you wanted to, you could go and plug in really whatever else you wanted to inside of this iPad and have a really good time with it too. So I think that in and of itself is another really cool thing going on for this particular device as well. And I, for one, I'm a massive fan of these particular iPads because, you can still almost kind of use it like a computer in a way. On the sides, it's kind of like a curved side a little bit, kind of like a flat side, to it. And on the back side, you're basically getting this complete flat back. So this is something that's really cool with this particular device because it's a complete flat back. The camera is completely flush on this thing too. And that's a very cool thing going on for this particular iPad. Once again, if you're going through and if you're buying a particular iPad, you're going to be getting a very, very good time with it for the most part because it is a very, well-built iPad. And for how cheap this particular device is, you would not believe how good of a device this thing actually is for the most part. Like, it feels, it's a cheap price, so it's not that expensive, but it's a very, very good price to pay for a device of this caliber. It feels very expensive in the hand, and this is something I actually love a lot. Like, if I'm going to go and buy an iPad, I definitely want it to be as, of good quality and good capability as possible, and this iPad is no exception. It's a very good performing iPad from that perspective, and I'm a massive fan of it for sure. Now, inside of the price tag standpoint, there's a few things going on here. So for one, it is still available brand new by Apple. I think it's like around $300, brand new by Apple. It is available in the used market as well, but I have seen so many random deals, so like all over the place. Best Buy has random deals too, and I think I've seen these for like about $249 or $229, something along those lines. And I feel like they're about the same price as that in the used market as well. That is an excellent price to pay for a device like this. Like, imagine getting an iPad that can probably replicate a lot of things you do inside of your computer or something at that type of price tag. It is incredible, and I would say that in and of itself is a very, very cool thing going on for this particular iPad. So personally for me, I'm a massive fan of this particular device, and if I'm going to go ahead and buy an iPad, I don't mind buying something like this because it's a really good price. And that's a very good thing going on for this particular device as well. So without a doubt, this iPad gets a thumbs up for me for sure from that particular perspective. Now on top of that, the camera of this thing is actually pretty good. Like, it actually isn't that bad of a camera, which is very, very insane. So with this device, you are getting basically on the back, you're getting an 8 megapixel standard camera, but weirdly on the front, you're getting a 12 megapixel camera. So it is very interesting how you're getting a better front-facing camera on this thing, at least a higher megapixel count on the front camera than the back camera. Now, both the front and the back, you can do 1080p. Actually, only the front you can do 1080p at 60. The back, you can do 1080p at 30. Now, this is probably, I wouldn't say the worst area of this iPad, but it definitely isn't the best area of this device. Like, I feel like the camera of this thing is very lackluster. And if you're going to go ahead and buy, an iPad and use a camera on it, this is not going to be that great of an experience, and you're definitely going to experience some weirdness going on for this particular device. So I will tell you right now, if you're going to go ahead and buy an iPad, you're definitely going to experience you're going to have a good experience on this iPad, but the camera quality really isn't going to be that great. That's just what happens. That's just what's going to happen here. Again, I don't want to recommend an iPad to people if you're going to be using the camera and have an amazing time with it. And in this case, it's not really going to be that great of an experience. So keep that in mind, but you can still do a lot of stuff with this camera. But there's no 4K at 60 on the front and the back. The front camera is nice because you do have essentially that face tracking feature, that spotlight mode or whatever it's called. So that's a pretty cool thing, but otherwise it's really going to be a very limited version of a camera that you probably experience. So keep that in mind. That's kind of how this camera holds up. In terms of software, this device is still supported with software. It's still going to be perfectly fine. You're getting iPadOS 17 on it, and it's probably going to be supported for another 2-3 years maybe. The way Apple's kind of been doing it is that if you go and buy this particular iPad, the iPads typically last longer than the iPhones of the same chipset, and this one has the same chipset as about the iPhone 11. So if the iPhone 11 gets another 2 years of software updates, this one is probably going to get 2 to 3 years of software updates from what I can see. So I think that's a cool thing. This phone is still going to be here for a long period of time, and it's still going to be supported for quite a bit of time as well, which is a very cool thing. So this device, from a software perspective, it gets a thumbs up for me. But another really cool thing I love about iPads, you have to remember, is that with these types of devices, you do actually go through and get a really good experience with that gesture-based design. So since iPadOS 11 or 12, you can go ahead and just, use the gestures and the swipe ups and everything to basically go through and basically swipe up and go around your particular iPad without having to go through and click the home button over and over and over again. So that's a really cool thing going on for this iPad as well. And that in and of itself gets a thumbs up for me for sure. So from that perspective, huge thumbs up, as well as a performance perspective. This is a really good thing going on for this particular iPad as well. Like I said, Apple A13 Bionic chip inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM. It isn't the fastest performing device of all time, so that can kind of be not an issue for some people, but that can be kind of a thing going on. If you're wanting the best performing iPad, this clearly is not it. But I don't think you're going for the best performing iPad. You're probably wanting an iPad that can get the job done, that can go ahead and essentially, be able to, use certain applications. And if you're a student writing notes, if you're, taking certain classes that need, to go on the websites or whatever, this is going to be perfectly fine for the most part for a lot of people. The only thing is that if you're wanting to play super intensive games, or you're planning on video editing on your iPad or something, then it can be a little bit of a different experience probably for some people, but it's still going to be pretty fast. You're still going to have a pretty good time with this particular iPad from that perspective as well. So personally for me, once again, when I'm looking at this type of iPad, you're actually getting a pretty good experience with it because it is a fast iPad and because you are getting that gesture-based design. So that kind of stuff is very, very important once again when you're getting this type of iPad. So when I look at this type of device and I look at this iPad, in the year of 2024, I think this is still one of the best priced iPads you can buy when it comes down to the price, when it comes down to the performance, when it comes down to everything across the board. You are getting an excellent performing device, which is insane and beautiful to me. This is a really good iPad. Since it first came out, I was a big fan of it, and I'm still a big fan of this particular iPad in this day and age. I think it's an excellent iPad, and I think realistically speaking, no matter what you're going to do with it, you're going to have a very, very good time with it. Now, if you want to spend a little bit more money, I would recommend iPads, like the iPad, 10 if you want to, the iPad, Pro, third generation, one of those types of iPads, those are going to be very good as well, or the iPad Pro 4 or 5, those ones would be better, or the iPad Air 5 or 4, those would be really good too. But this is a very good iPad as well, and I can't recommend this iPad enough. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.